In this movie, we're going to talk about types and values. Now, computer programs work by manipulating values. We saw an example of that in some of the previous movies. For example, we put the first name, our first name in a variable, and then put our last name in a variable, and then we put those two together. That's an example of manipulating values. Now, in order for a language to manipulate the values, it must know the difference between the values. For example, the plus symbol, which is the operator we use to put the first name and last name together, is also an operator that can be used with numbers to add numbers together. And so it's important for the language to know what values it's dealing with. Now, the kinds of values that are used in a programming language are referred to as types. So first, let's take a look at the different types that are available in JavaScript. First, we have strings. We've seen some examples of strings. A name is a string. We have two examples here on the screen. Notice that 67, even though it's a number, because it is contained within quotes, it becomes a string, not a number. A string can also be a long sentence or a long paragraph. It doesn't simply need to be one word, but it's anything that's contained between those quotes. And it can be single quotes. The next type is a number. There's three examples of numbers there: 32, 3.14, and -10. Those are all numbers. Notice how they differ from the 67 in the previous example. It's not contained within quotes. Then we have Booleans. There are only two values for Booleans. There is true and false, and that is all. Where with strings and numbers you can have an infinite number of values, with Booleans there's only two values. Then we have the type undefined and the type null. We'll deal with this in a little more detail later, but basically undefined represents nothing and null represents nothing. The difference between the two is undefined is a state assigned by the system. So if you declare something but no value is ever put into it, it's undefined. Where null is something that's declared by the computer, by the program. You're declaring that there is no value in there. And we have symbols. Now, symbols is a part of ES6. Symbols we will not deal with in this particular course, but I want to make sure that you're aware of it, that it's one of the types that's available in JavaScript. Finally, the last type we want to mention is objects. Everything else in JavaScript is an object. So examples of objects are arrays, functions, JavaScript objects. All of those are objects. Now, the 6 types above objects, those are all considered primitive data types, and then everything else is an object. Now, the main difference between primitive data types and objects is that one's malleable and one's not. Malleable simply means it can be changed. It's a programming term that you can change something. Now, objects are malleable. They can be changed. Primitive data types are not. So the first 6 shown there are primitive data types. We're going to take a look now at manipulating or working with some of these data types, mainly strings and numbers.